Elizabeth Gardano, who will give you an introduction. So good afternoon, everybody. And so what is going to be today's webinar? Today's webinar will be a scientific presentation of the aspect of the core topic that is that of data quality in preclinical research and development. So what will be covered will be done. This will be done by the leader of the team that has prepared this topic. And what will be covered will be the objectives that the project, the action that will be created from this call for proposal will have to achieve, why this need to be done in IMI as a public-private collaborative research program and action, how such a project should be structured, what are the expected contribution from you, from the applicants, and also on the other side, since the aim is to create a public-private partnership, what are the contributions that the FPA, the industry participant, will bring to this project? And of course, last but not least, what this project will have to deliverable and what are the key deliverables. What we will not talk about today, but of course, if you have some specific question, I will be able to answer you, is rules and procedure. For this, we will have a dedicated webinar that will take place on the 25th of April at 10:30 a.m. Brussels time. And you can already register on this for this webinar as you have done for the webinar you are in now. So, but what I would like also to tell you is a little bit of few tips when things that you should consider and remember when you will submit a proposal. So first of all, it's very important that you will read all the relevant material on the IMI website. In particular, for this call, there will be an update to the template for proposal, and also there will be an update to the evaluation criteria that will be used from now on for this type of two-stage action, a call for proposal. So this, of course, will be explained more in the rule and procedure webinar, but please be aware about this and read very carefully the material that you will find on the IMI website when the call is launched. It is also very important that you understand the IMI2 rules and respect them. And also that in any case, remember also that if you have any question, you should not contact the industry topic coordinators, but you should always go through our program office. In fact, this is because to create a no situation of a conflict of interest, that could even mean at the end that if you submit a proposal, then and there is a problem with conflict of interest, this could be rejected. Also remember, once you are preparing your proposal, that you will need to, in your proposal, include all the information that the reviewer will need to evaluate it. So indeed, the reviewer will need only to base themselves on your proposal, so it's very, very important that you do it as good as possible. And also is important that even if the call is not launched, please start to work early. We have already all pre-material available that give you a very good idea on the call for launch and on the content, and you will have also this webinar available for going back to it. So please try to work in particular for what concerns also the networking. Once you have prepared your proposal and you submit it, remember that you will have to do it via the IMI Sophia submission tool, and that when you will submit, you will have also to finalize it in order to be able this to be visible for us and then go for evaluation. So you need first, finalize and then submit. You have more tips that are available on our website at the link that you see on this slide. We see very often some mistakes that such that the proposal either will not at all go for evaluation or it is deemed to fail. So first of all, remember that we have some rules for making a proposal admissible and eligible. So first of all, you need to submit by deadline. So if you miss the deadline, of course, your proposal will not be submitted in time and will not go for evaluation. You need, of course, to stick to what is the topic. So proposals that are out of scope will also not go for evaluation. And also you need to use the template that is available. So again, please you will have to be very careful because we have a specific template that is different from the Horizon 2020. And the last but not least, remember that for eligibility, you need to be at least 3 legal entities that are eligible for IMI funding. Also, if you want to increase your chance of success, be aware that you need, of course, to try to prepare the best possible partnership. So, of course, you don't want to have redundancy between the partners, but on the other hand, you need to have a good core of expertise so that you can address all the objectives. Indeed, each proposal is judged on the basis that you need to be able to address all the objectives in the topic text. And also, what is very important is also that you manage to prepare a proposal that has a good impact, because limited impact of the proposal, despite the scientific excellence, will clearly penalize it in relationship with other possible submission. Then, of course, you are here also because you are interested to find other partners. And as Catherine already said, the list of all the participants in the webinar will be distributed. And so this is already a good starting point. Also, I mean, when you are in the question and answer, you can also flag if you have some specific expertise or interest for, or you already are preparing a consortium, you can flag that already. Then, of course, apart from network with your fellow webinar participant, you can use the IMI partner search tool. The link is available on the slides. And also get in touch with your local IMI contact point, talk with your health national contact point, and network on social media. For example, we have an IMI LinkedIn group. And of course, if you have any further question or doubt, you can contact us, and you can use the email address that is in the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Elisabetta. I'm just going to change slides now so that we can see Thomas's, and I'm going to unmute Thomas so that he can already start speaking. So Thomas, I'll just get your slide up. Maybe you'd like to start already talking about your topic.
Oh, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time and interest to listen to what I have to say about our consortium proposal on data quality in preclinical research and development. Just a bit of background on myself. I'm Thomas Steckler. I'm working at Janssen Research and Development within the Bioresearch Quality Organization, and myself also have a lot of background in the neuroscience area. I've also asked some colleagues to join me today in case there are specific questions. I have Tom van der Kastelen sitting here with me. He's a statistician, so he can answer questions related to that. I have Anja Gilles also from the Bioresearch Quality Organization. And on the phone, we also have Carsten Wicke from AbbVie. He also has a strong neuroscience background and works in drug discovery at AbbVie in Ludwigshafen. Now, the consortium itself consists of a variety of different people from pharmaceutical industry, from FPR partners. At this moment, we're talking about neuroscientists, behavioral pharmacologists, safety experts, statisticians, and also quality experts. Next slide, please. So why actually do we need the public-private collaboration as it would be proposed under IMI? Well, first of all, it's important to realize, and I guess most of you will know that, of course, that there's plenty of literature around that suggests that reproducibility of data that has been published can be problematic. And in particular, there are issues with robustness of data, generalizability of data, which in turn might lead to low reproducibility amongst other factors. For pharmaceutical industry, this is a big issue because we need to also rely on data that are public, and we also need to, of course, rely on data that we generate ourselves or in collaborations. And we need to have good data in all of these instances to make good decisions in drug development. However, that is not necessarily the case in all instances, and I think there's room for improvement. And we believe strongly that we need a concerted action that involves really experts from different areas in industry and academia to improve that situation. This really is the reason why we have proposed this new IMI consortium, which has an initial duration of 3 years with an option to be extended for another 2 years. Next slide, please. The overall objectives of the consortium really is, of course, to advance the quality of data that is used for decision-making in R&D, research and development, as well as in basic science. More specifically, we'd like to focus on 3 objectives. First of all, we would like to better understand the variables that really determine and govern reproducibility. And therefore, we would like to, first of all, run retrospective analysis of already existing, so to speak, historic data sets that originate from the different partners. As peer partners, pharmaceutical industry, have huge data sets on specific assays, and there is a lot of commonality here for particular assays. We believe strongly that we can merge those data sets and really create large data sets that can then be analyzed further. Furthermore, we would also like to do prospective studies, cross-site validation studies involving all the different partners to also address and test the factors that we determine with the historical analysis further. Secondly, we would like to develop recommendations based on those findings that originate from the retrospective and prospective analysis, and come up with recommendations that are more generalizable to different sets of data. Next slide, please. Finally, we would like to develop a training platform that can be used both by industry to train new scientists, for instance, as well as by academia to, for instance, train young researchers, students, but also, of course, other colleagues. And the idea here would be that we, again, capitalize on the findings that we have generated under these experimental studies, looking at historical and prospective data, and on the recommendations we generate based on those findings. We would like to also use that platform and beta test it as part of what we call a young scientist training scheme that we plan to establish. And I will come back to that later on again in more detail. And the idea here would be to first, of course, test that training platform amongst the partners of the consortium, but then eventually to roll it out to the wider scientific community. Next slide, please. So by nature, the IMI consortia are pre-competitive in nature, and we believe that this is an excellent platform to build our consortium with a broad base of different experts from various areas and organizations, which should include drug discovery and basic research, but also, of course, quality assurance, IT and data management, educational expertise is required. We would like to involve funders, publishers, and also like to get some regulatory input, if at all possible. So the idea really is here to share data, retrospectively, prospectively, but also tools, for instance, that could be animal models, that could be compounds, and all of that via the Young Scientist Exchange program, which then also would enable some sharing of infrastructure as well. The next slide, please. So what we hope to achieve here is that we facilitate understanding of the different perspectives coming from the different areas where we get input from, that we foster interaction between scientists from the different organizations and also between quality and research organizations where we strongly believe that there is improvement possible in terms of communication, and also to ensure that we have a wider acceptance of the recommendations we would like to come up with a broad base of different experts bringing their point of views into the equation. As I've mentioned before, we would like to base it all on the Young Researchers Exchange scheme, which essentially means that we would like to have a group of young researchers that could be, for instance, PhD students that could be shared amongst partners, spending half of the time at an academic lab, half of the time at an industry lab, and the costs would be also shared in that SPIA would commit 50% of the costs as an in-kind contribution, and 50% of the cost would be covered via the IMI contributions. We would like to also then use this platform to do some usability testing of the newly developed quality principles in terms of beta testing, really. And of course, we see this pretty much as a nucleus where the knowledge of best practice will expand in the future and the word is spread. I think also that's a unique opportunity for these type of young researchers that, first of all, get a lot of education in terms of experimental design and data quality, but also will have this joint experience both at the academic side and the industrial side. Next slide, please. So what is the expected impact on the R&D process? Based on what I've just said, we expect that we will have better trained researchers. We'd also like to come up with some more common standards for preclinical research. That means that hopefully we come up with recommendations that will lead to more reliable and reproducible models, harmonized, standardized protocols and procedures. We also believe that it has a beneficial impact on future collaborations. First of all, I think that it will facilitate collaborations between the different players, big pharma, startups, but also, of course, academic groups, other research organizations, and that, of course, the different players that will be involved will also be potentially more successful in future collaborations, adhering to best practices that we try to develop. We also believe that we will strengthen the IP, the intellectual property situation eventually for new inventions, because if you have more solid data that back up your findings, that might also have beneficial effect on IP. Last but not least, we are convinced that we will have a significant contribution to the 3 R's: reduction, refinement, and replacement of animal studies, because if you have more meaningful data by nature, you also will have less waste of animals. Next slide, please. So what does the suggested architecture of the project look like? As you can see depicted here in general, we have at this moment defined 5 different work packages, and of course all of this is still up for discussions once the full consortium is formed. Possibly the most important work packages here would be work package 2, focusing primarily on the research quality issues, work package 3 focusing on quality processing, and work package 4 on the educational platform. Of course, also work package 1 and 5 are important, but as you can also see from what I've said before, those 3 would be the main platforms, and as you can see here as well, work package 2 and 3 is further split up into sub work packages. And I briefly will say a few words about the different work packages. And if you just go to the next, or if you just click, very good. So work package 1 really is more to do with project management. So it's about the strategy, implementation of that strategy, about planning, budgeting, follow-up tracking, and consolidation. And to click again, please. Work package 2.1 would be the historical data analysis focus, as mentioned that before. So here really we try to determine the primary variables, as I said before, in study design and data analysis that affect the data quality and levels of robustness. Click again, please. Work package 2 would be the development of the guiding principles to improve preclinical robustness. So here really we would like to capitalize on the findings that come out of work package 2.1 and develop the key principles that underlie the standard assays to improve robustness, reproducibility, and research efficiency. So the process here is briefly depicted on the bottom of that slide now. You see, we would like to have an initial literature and policy review. Then at our own findings from work package 2, we find these principles and criteria and then come up with some recommendations. Click again, please. Work package 3 then would be more the prospective activities across site validation studies amongst partners. So here we would like to validate these principles that we have identified based on the review of the literature, the policies, and based on the findings from the retrospective studies in different research settings. Initial focus here is on neuroscience and safety to really keep it manageable. It's not because it would be the only areas where that would be applicable. So we just use neuroscience and safety as a tool to come up with somewhat generalizable conclusions. And we would like to again develop the key principles for the development of standard assays based on those findings. And next again. Then we have work package 3.1, so that would be the first work package that's more concerned with the quality processes as such. So here we really would like to develop a quality management system that has a beneficial impact for the research activities. What does it mean really is that we would like to come up with some principles that are applicable to good science really, meaning that we have data integrity, so that we have data, for instance, that do not have any inadvertent errors and copy-paste errors or things like this, that data are fully disclosed, also negative data, that reporting is unbiased, and that storage is done in a safe manner and fully traceable. Would like to again not only propose these processes, but also would like to test the suitability in the beta testing procedures in the young scientist efforts that I've mentioned before, because you can propose a lot of things. If they only add to bureaucracy, then it doesn't fulfill the purpose. So we really would like to also have a handle to say, yes, what we want to achieve here makes sense and has a benefit. Next, please. Then, of course, you also need to not just propose these things, but you also need to maintain them. So we want to set up a governance for this type of quality management systems and come up with some mechanisms that can be useful here. And those could be, for instance, to come up with criteria across sites that can be used for audit outcomes, and also would like to perform some of these cross-site reviews of data to really learn about best practice. Eventually, one could also think of a proficiency testing system here and an accreditation scheme for partners that can be developed. Next, please. Then, of course, we have the educational platform that should be based on electronic means. That could be, for instance, in form of webinars. That could be in big scheme in terms of MOOCs. Also, that's possibly beyond the scope here. And that should be applicable both to industry and to academic researchers. And eventually, as I've mentioned before, we would like to disseminate those principles to a broader audience. Next, please. And last but not least, we have the data management component, because the data management is pivotal here, and we need to have a suitable database as well that allows us to store all this historical data to make them amenable to subsequent analysis. And that the database also needs to fulfill a number of important criteria. For instance, that it stays in place even after the end of our IMI consortium. So it's an important aspect to take care of as well. Next, please. Just go on, please. Okay. So what do we, or what would we like to see in terms of expertise in the applicant consortium? As you can already guess here, we would like to see a strong preclinical neuroscience and neuropharmacology component present, because we need to have that match with the goals that we try to achieve from an SPEAR part. Of course, also preclinical safety is an important aspect. We'd like to also have some translational expertise, if possible, expertise on biomarkers of imaging or electrophysiological measures, in particular EEG, would be highly desired. Then we have this ongoing PhD student program to really nourish the young researcher scheme that we try to set up. Important here is that we would not like to envision this as a scheme where we train PhD students from scratch, because we are limited in time. Initially, we have 3 years. So what we'd like to have here is that these young researchers already have a basic ability to perform some of the tasks that have been assigned to them. So it's not about learning new methodology in terms of biological assays, for instance. This is something we would like to see as already established. The benefit here comes more on the data quality and experimental design angle. Yeah. We'd also like to see, of course, statistical expertise in the applicant consortium, because we plan to generate these large data sets on historical data, but also, of course, on the prospective data that come from the cross-site analysis, and the capability to analyze those data needs to be present. Then we'd like to also have ideally some contributions to those historical data, but of course even more so to the prospective data sets from the academic partners in terms of data in vivo on animal models, but also on the electrophysiology. We'd like to see some quality assurance capabilities that might sound a bit frightening at the first sight, but if you look at the developments in academia, you see that there are more and more groups coming up that focus in terms of academic research integrity. You have ethics groups, you have other quality groups that focus on non-regulated biomedical research aspects, also in universities. So you should be able to find those expertises. We would like, ideally, to have some synergies with health authorities, the latter more in an advisory role, because we are not really looking in the regulated space, and also some patient organizations and other neuroscience or quality organization contributions would be of benefit. And of course, small to medium-sized enterprises, CROs, would always be welcome. Next slide, please. What are the expected contributions from the applicant consortium? As I said before, we have a strong statistical focus here, and we would like to have some capabilities when it comes to Bayesian type of analysis, frequencies, methods, meta-analytic approaches, factor analysis. That's important for part of our work packages. Then, of course, we would like to see contributions when it comes to literature and policy views. We would like the applicant consortium to contribute to the development of key principles for guiding of the development of standard assays, and also to contributions to establish systems that allow systematic evaluation of the reproducibility and validity of published work. Last but not least, of course, these partners should also contribute to the discussion on the harmonized test protocol, which then can be used for the prospective studies. Next slide, please. For these prospective studies, we really try and focus, as I've mentioned before, on some in vivo studies, in particular behavioral studies, electrophysiological and neurochemical studies on rodent models, transgenic animals, mice, rats, in the field of neurodegenerative disorders, Alzheimer's disease in particular, looking at cognitive function, looking at synaptic plasticity, which can also be of value, of course, for some psychiatric disorders, so that is not excluded. The studies we'd like to focus on involve memory, attention, cognitive control, synaptic transmission, connectivity, and translation EEG methods. As I said before, the consortium as such is not really limited to these areas in neuroscience, but we need to keep a manageable focus because we need to have certain overlap amongst partners to really enable the generation of these large data sets, to enable cross-site validation studies, and last but not least, then by doing that, to enable proof of concept. We'd also like to have the applicant consortium to contribute to the quality criteria that we would like to use for beta testing to initially across sites, but then criteria that we'd like to generalize and propose to the wider scientific community. And we'd like to also have a contribution to the proficiency testing system for quality and robustness in terms of ring testing, where one partner would send out some blinded compounds and the other would test it, so that by doing so, you can get some ideas about your own assays, the reproducibility, where they stand in terms of comparison to the data from others. Next slide, please. Then, of course, we'd like to have this joint deliverable of a quality system that should be generated to beta testing. I've mentioned that before already. We'd like to generate some risk assessment tools so that we can get a better handle of where we find the risk in areas of biomedical research. I'd like to come up with some cross-site criteria for data review across partners. I'd like to come up with this third-party accreditation system, if possible, that could be in a form like you have it, for instance, with ALAC and on the animal welfare side, so that you have a sort of independent body eventually that gives some sort of accreditation to a partner. That could be highly interesting for various reasons. We'd like to develop electronic training together, and of course also the data sharing platform should be a joint development. And last but not least, of course, we have the supervision of the shared young researchers, where we like to see a strong contribution from the applicants. Now the next slide, please. That gives you an idea about where the S-peer partners come from, and just to give you an idea, first of all, who those partners are. We have now members from ADVI, Carsten Wicke is online, I've mentioned that before, but we also have people and colleagues from Boehringer Ingelheim, then Janssen here, from Novartis, Orion, Pfizer, Transgenic, Roche, Servier, and UCB. So in total, we have 10 different S-peer partners that have an interest and contribute to those efforts. The expertise from those partners lies both in the preclinical in vivo and in vitro areas of neuroscience. Then we have the safety expertise, where we'd like to focus on CNS-related safety aspects, translation research, primarily in terms of EEG at this moment would come into play. We have the quality management expertise, statistical expertise, and also data management and project management expertise. Next slide. When it comes to the in-kind contribution from the partners, we're talking roughly an indicative in-kind budget of 4.5 million over the course of 3 years. It comes from the FPR partners, and that would be matched then by IMI. Besides that, of course, and part of that, in fact, would be the provision of the existing data set and the study protocols from the FPR partners, focusing, as I said before, on neuroscience, psychiatry, or psychiatric disorders with cognitive deficits and neurodegeneration being here the prime focus, and the safety assays. We would provide transgenic model organisms and tool compounds, as I've mentioned before. We would like to also provide statistical input. The literature and policy review contributions would be part of that in-kind contribution. Also, the development of key principles for guiding the development of standard assays, and then the system for systematic evaluation of published work would also be a joint effort. Last but not least, of course, the development of the harmonized test protocols. Next slide, please. Then we have, of course, a contribution to the prospective cross-site studies. Again, this would be a joint effort between the applicant consortium and the FPR consortium, where we would also run these studies side by side. We'd like to also, of course, focus on contributions on quality management. So we would like to also contribute to the definition and implementation of quality criteria. We'd like to help with the development of the preclinical proficiency testing system, the ring testing, as I've mentioned before. Then, of course, the delivery of a quality management system and beta testing will be part of the in-kind contributions. Then we have the development of the risk assessment tool, the development of cross-site criteria for audit outcomes, the accreditation system, and also the electronic training would be part of the in-kind contributions from FPR partners. Then we have, of course, also the development of a data sharing platform that would be a joint effort, and the supervision of shared young researchers, as I've mentioned before, in a 50-50 manner, both from a time perspective, but also from an in-kind contributions or contribution from IMI. So you can see from what I've said so far, there is a lot of joint efforts really planned in the consortium, where we expect input both from the pharmaceutical industry and from the academic members or other members from the applicant consortium. Next slide, please. You might ask yourself, of course, what is in it for me? Why should I join that? I believe strongly that this is a very unique opportunity to have a joint effort to address the concerns about limitations in robustness, vigor, and validity of research data, something we all faced with. And it's also a unique opportunity to contribute to shape the research environment and make a contribution here in terms of setting up quality criteria for preclinical tests, setting up consensus quality management recommendations, and also to contribute to the development of this educational platform that in the long term has a strong impact on the way people work and will enhance the scientific quality principles. Of course, also there's a benefit in that we believe that the membership in this consortium will go along with some perceived credibility, and having been part of it will possibly make you a more attractive partner for industry collaborations in the future. And also, we believe a more attractive employer in the future for students, for instance, wanting to join because they can trust the data that will be developed. From a student perspective, of course, it's not to be underestimated that PhD students that come out of the efforts will have some competitive advantage as well, because they will have experience both in academia and industry and have been trained to high quality principles and in the ethical standards. And last but not least, of course, there is an improvement here, and that goes for all of us, I believe, in our standards, you know, in day-to-day research practice, and we can learn from each other and what to do best. And I think this is something we should not, again, underestimate, because I'm sure it's something where all of us can benefit. Next slide, please. This brings me almost to the end of my presentation. So just to sum up, what are the key deliverables of the full project? First of all, we'd like to develop generally applicable, lean and efficacious quality principles for preclinical research. We'd like to develop a quality assurance system that's fit for purpose, that's not overly bureaucratic, but really helpful to advance science and foster innovation. We'd like to develop this cross-site criteria for audit outcome and possibly the third-party accreditation system. We'd like to implement and establish a database for open sharing of information of replication attempts. We'd like to really understand the factors and variables that affect robustness and generalizability, and translate this from our assays more broadly to commonly used assays. We like to undertake some feasibility testing of those principles, set up a ring testing scheme, and last but not least, develop this training platform that I've mentioned a couple of times by now. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And if there are questions, we are happy to answer.
So thank you very much, Thomas. I've also just unmuted Carsten Vicker, who is on the line, and Thomas, as you mentioned earlier, also has some colleagues with him. So it's now your turn to ask your questions, and we do have a few in already. So the first one that I'm going to take comes from Björn Gerlach, and he asks, will the data for historical data analysis under Objective 1 come from FPA members, or is it expected that it will come from a non-FPA consortium?
I can take that question. Certainly, the bulk of data will come from FPA members, because there are a number of paradigms that are frequently used within pharma industry for drug development, and so we can capitalize from those efforts. Having said this, I would see it as advantages if an academic consortium could also contribute some of those data.
Okay, thank you. Another question, which I think is more for you, Elisabetta, comes from Harold Schmidt, and he asks, can individual scientists apply to join?
So, as explained in one of my slides, so we have some minimum requirement for the number of legal entities that has to be included in the proposal to be eligible, and this is 3. But be aware that proposal have to address all the objectives, so you need to have the critical mass to be able to do so. Of course, on the other hand, of course, you should also not have any redundancy. So you need to have enough partner just to get all the objectives done. So 1 is too little also to be eligible. So minimum 3.
If you are at all unsure, any of you, about our rules and procedures, especially things like the eligibility criteria, I will add that we do have a webinar just on our rules and procedures on Monday, the 25th of April at 10:30 in the morning, Brussels time, Central European time. So I would urge, I mean, you are welcome to ask questions now as well, but if you have a lot of questions and you're really unsure about our rules, I really would urge you to sign up to that webinar, and if you can't make it, check out the presentation afterwards and download it and listen to it, because it's really quite important to get all of those things right. Harold has another question. He asks, would stroke be a focus?
I can take this as well, not at this moment. We had this discussion before. As I said, we need to have a critical mass to really ensure that we can have proof of concept. And so the decision was taken that we would focus on neurodegeneration, in particular Alzheimer, and as I said before, the psychiatric disorders that are associated possibly with some neurodegeneration as well, but certainly with cognitive dysfunction. That gives us an interesting set of data where we see a lot of commonalities. Stroke might be something that is addressed again in the future, but not at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you. Carsten Clausen asks, are the historical data from FP partners already defined and selected for release?
No. We, of course, had some discussions on what those data could be, because we needed to first make sure that at least we have a common base of data that we can share. But this, in fact, would be something we should discuss then as a joint consortium, because that's part, as said before, if we might want to also get some data from the applicant consortium if at all possible, and we wouldn't like to preclude some areas where these contributions are possible.
But Thomas, I guess this is Carsten. I guess it's fair to say that, of course, we have had some pre-discussions in that regard, and there is at least some common sense so far from the FPR partners that there should be certain data should be in, but that of course does not preclude that to add others of high interest.
That's correct.
Another question from Carsten. For work package 5, do you expect the development of a new repository, or could an existing one be used?
Well, to be honest, I think it would be ideal if we could already capitalize on a repository that's existing already and that can then be modified. And there might be partners around that already have some infrastructure in that respect, and that we could capitalize on.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Harold Schmidt. Isn't the AD focus or silo also part of the translational problems that need to be addressed, i.e. outdated disease definitions and models based on an organ, symptoms, or disease named after a doctor, especially if you have systems biology on your agenda?
Well, that's a bit of a philosophical question, I believe. I would agree that we have to be very careful here when it comes to disease definitions, and of course people have defined different types of Alzheimer's disease and risk factors that might lead to the disorder. But this is not really the purpose of the present consortium. There are other initiatives that might be much better positioned to address those questions. We do not want to start querying diagnosis or definitions of disease. This is beyond the purpose of that consortium. What we'd like to do is to use the models that are used to better understand diseases as they have been defined now, and to develop new therapies to treat those diseases, and to see where we can improve the data quality that's generated with these models. Of course, I believe that having improved data quality also means that you have better predictability of your models because they're more robust. But it's not the purpose to start querying DSM-5.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Harold. Aren't the major factors already known? Underpowered studies and publication bias?
Well, that's certainly important factors, but it's, I believe, not the only factors that come into play. And I believe that because it's already widely known that those factors play a role, quite a lot of people, including industry, try to address those questions like power, like bias, and still we do see a lot of variability, and still we struggle with predictability of our data. So I think there are other factors that come into play and that we need to figure out.
Okay. Ulrich Diernagel says, could you repeat the names of the pharma companies involved, the information that you gave at the beginning?
Sure. Let me see that I make it out of head. We have AbbVie, we have Boehringer, we have Novartis, we have Pfizer, we have Servier, UCB, Janssen, Orion, who have, did I forget? Roche, and I'm missing one. Novartis I've mentioned already. I'm trying to figure out if there was Transgenic, not to forget.
Thank you. So, I mean, again, once we launch the call, then we'll publish the full call text, which will have all of this information in there. A question from Henning Weicht. Could you elaborate on how far research from non-neuroscience disciplines could be included?
Well, there's certainly a scope here because the principles are hopefully applicable more generally than just neuroscience. So neuroscience really is a tool here, as important as it is to focus. And of course, if there are contributions, for instance, in the area of statistics, in the area of data management, all of that is not bound to any neuroscience focus. So there is scope in other areas as well. But of course, from the pure research angle, the focus is on neuroscience and safety, for that matter.
Yeah, I think, Thomas, here important to say that people should read the topic text and they should stick to what will be written in the topic text. This is very important, of course.
Because the evaluators, that's what they will judge you against. So once the call is launched, do read the topic text carefully. We have a question from Cass McKay, who thanks you for your presentation and asked if we can advise on timelines, for example, launch date and close date. Well, we should be launching it in the very near future. Once it is launched, usually there are about 3 months to put together your short proposal, but I would advise you do keep a close eye on the website. We will send you a notification anyway when the call is launched so that you're all aware, but keep a close eye on the IMI website, and once it's launched, I really would advise you to read all the information carefully, and you'll have all the details there on deadlines and everything. Winfried Neuhaus has a question. Is also the translation animal to human considered as an important point in the development of quality criteria?
Principally, yes. But again, the focus on in terms of the data we are looking at will be strictly in the preclinical area. Yeah? Again, to keep it manageable. But of course, again, the principles that we develop out of that will be equally applicable to experimental medicine studies, and because what at the end is you, instead of testing non-human subjects, you're testing human subjects. So the principles are the same, and from that perspective, there is that angle as well. But again, for the purpose of that particular consortium, we are looking at the preclinical area.
Okay. A question now from Paul Check. Is the database structure open to sequential database management, and are the tools open for big data analytics techniques, or maybe even focused to this?
Well, that's up to the discussion of the full consortium, I believe. Obviously, we had some discussions within the FPR group on what such a database could look like. But I mean, that of course is the purpose of having a fully fleshed out proposal once the consortium is formed. And I would not want to exclude any type of analysis like big data analysis or what have you at this moment in time. So we are certainly flexible when it comes to that.
Thank you. We have a question now from Nicola Ferro. What is the expected role of ICT and information management? Work package 5 is about building an information management system, but in the expected expertise and contributions bit, ICT is only vaguely mentioned. Do you expect academic partners researching on the information management part, or do you foresee only companies adapting already existing solutions?
Well, I think both is possible again. I've been in other IMI consortia where we had some expertise that came jointly, for instance, from the industry partners and the academic partners in terms of database generation and management. But of course, you could also envision a situation where you would have an IT CRO SME that could, for instance, contribute that capability. That's also an option.
Okay. We have a question from Malcolm McLeod. Can you give some indication of the size, level of annotation of the FPM member data sets available? How many animals, experiments, years covered, etc.?
Hi, Malcolm. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, I cannot give you a clear indication of that because I'm not aware of the number of data that exist in the different companies. But what you can for surely suggest is that certain data, and it depends again on what exactly we're talking about when it comes to the data, that for certain data sets we have big databases in, I would think, every FP partner's database, because some of those assays are routinely used in drug development.
Thank you. We have a question from Philip Zitoun, I think that says, are SMEs working already in historical scientific data management and sharing? Welcome, even in work package 5 is the last one.
Can you please repeat the question?
Not entirely clear at the end, but I think basically the question is, are SMEs already working in historical scientific data management and sharing? Welcome. Is there a place for them in the consortium?
Of course. Again, I mean, I think it's important to be clear here. I think the strong value here is in pooling resources, and pooling capabilities. And I think it's for me certainly not the idea to set up just another competitive consortium, but I think we really need to try and maximize capabilities and work together to really also maximize the outcome of all of that.
Okay, thank you. We have two questions from Sabine Holter. How many species have to be covered? Would it just mouse be sufficient? And also, would other than mouse transgenic models be provided by the FPO partners?
Well, I certainly think that mouse, when it comes to transgenic models, would be the key species. Yeah. Carsten, I don't know whether you want to comment on the use of transgenic rats.
I guess transgenic rats is not that widely provided and available nowadays. So definitely the focus would be on the mice. Also, of course, for the safety, maybe even there is more sharing between rats and mice. But I guess for the efficacy models in neuroscience, it's mostly, if not exclusively, mice. So we haven't finally discussed that. And to be frank, I personally would not exclude anything using transgenic rats. But as I said, the availability is somewhat limited.
But again, I mean, there are, of course, also other efficacy models around that, in particular when it comes to the area of psychiatry, where rats are used. So,
absolutely, but not transgenic rats in that regard.
No, not transgenic. But that ideally would be covered as well.
Sure.
We can anticipate that some data that come from the FPA partners will also involve, if you like, manipulated normal animals like rats.
Okay. We have a question from Julien Colomb, and he asks, what are you planning to fund exactly? PhD students, postdocs, SEM employees, all of them? Can you maybe give an example of what you expect to fund?
Well, really the discussion at this moment when it comes to this joint efforts centers around PhD students. Yeah, so the idea here would be to have that group of joint students, as I said before, that spend half of the time in an academic lab, half of the time in an industrial lab, and where half of the costs would be covered by FPA partners and half of the costs then would come from the IMI matching. So that would be the main funding. So in essence, you can envision it that the time the students spent at the industrial part would be covered by the industrial funding, including the salary, and that the other part in the academic lab can be covered via the IMI funds. We would not, from an FPA perspective, fund any other types of personnel.
I think maybe here is better to just to clarify, because I think that people could get a bit confused. So we should, on one side, have the pot of the IMI funding. So when you look at the budget in the topic, you will see two numbers. You will see the IMI funding, which is a maximum of 4.5 million. And this is up to the consortium to make the best possible plan for using of these resources, but taking, of course, in consideration that the FPR partner will provide this in-kind contribution and also some financial contribution to the cost of the PhD students, especially that will be shared. So just that you are paying a bit of attention that you have these two type of funding. So the IMI2 funding and the in-kind contribution, which are two different parts. You should apply for the budget for the IMI funding, including also then some extra funding for PhD students that could be then shared with the FPA.
Thank you. We have a question from Elizabeth Ions. Most of the partners haven't yet published data from their internal data sets on the rates of reproducibility they've observed. Do the partners have data sets on the reproducibility rates of these specific disease areas based on academic published studies?
Well, I believe that many, if not most of, or all of the FPA partners have strong internal efforts ongoing to improve the quality of the data that are generated internally. Publications on those efforts are rather limited at this moment in time.
Okay, we have a follow-up question from Winifred Neuhaus, who had originally asked about the translation from animal to human, and asks, should human in vitro models be included?
It's a question that can be debated as part of the full consortium. If there are sufficient data sets and if those data can be shared, that might be interesting. Although I think we have to be clear here that normally those human data have to adhere to very strict ethical guidelines. So it's possibly not so easy to find enough data to make a meaningful big data set for analysis. But maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. We have another question from Malcolm McLeod. Were the NC3Rs to be involved? Would this be on the academic or the FPA side?
I think it would be great to have them involved, whatever it takes. So if you want to reach out to NC3R, and if they could get involved, that would be fantastic. It really depends on how they would see their role and where they could contribute.
Okay, we have another question from Paul Check, which is a little similar to his other one. But it was mentioned that the database should be structured. Is this call open to big data tools and therefore non-structured databases?
You want to comment on that?
Yeah, this is Tom van der Kastelen speaking. I think in theory it's open, but it may be pretty challenging to deal with these kinds of data on a short time frame. So I think that would depend on how unstructured the data would be, and would the fact that they are unstructured, would it allow to get some crucial information from the bigger database, or does it include to deal with a big chunk of all kinds of different types of data that are included there? I think that needs to be looked at on maybe a case-by-case basis, and if there is few data sets available like that, it may not be worth the investment or to look into.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Sabina Hota. You stressed that EEG would be highly desired. Do you mean the ability to perform EEG on rodents?
Yes, exactly. So we have certainly some partners within SPIA that could share some of the EEG data, and those are usually big data sets. EEG data that can be used for the retrospective analysis. And of course, if we could add some historical data from other sources, that would be fantastic. But of course, if you have those data, you would also like to do some prospective studies to then validate your initial assumptions. So ideally, we would have some EEG capability on rodents.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Elidio Correa. Are you thinking about using 3D cellular models to avoid the use of such a large number of animals in the in vivo assays?
Well, at this moment in time, the focus will be on the in vivo side, because that's where we have a lot of historical data that can be shared, and that's where we also have a lot of expertise from the members that are part of that consortium. So again, we would not want to exclude in vitro models at this moment in time, but clearly it has to be understood that the focus will be on in vivo.
Okay, thank you. And what is currently the last question for the moment from Winifred Neuhaus, and it's one for Elisabetta and I really. How many consortia will you be funding? One?
So yes, indeed, our project works in a way that the output of the first stage evaluation will be a ranking list, of which the first ranked will be invited to prepare the full proposal together with the SPIA consortium, and this will be then evaluated again at stage 2.
And again, if you are at all unsure about how the IMI calls for proposals work, I really would advise you to come along to our Rules and Procedures webinar in a couple of weeks, because we'll be discussing all of these things. We have another question, a follow-up one from Julien Colombe. Did I get it correctly? You plan on funding only PhD students, and you expect that these students will have already the biology technical skills?
Well, what we expect is that they at least have some basic skills. We don't want to have students that need to be trained for months in a certain technique, because we would not have the time to really allow us to educate those students then on the quality criteria, and to use this group of people for really also the testing of what we try to develop here, and to also analyze the data from the historical data sets, running studies from the prospective studies. So we need to have some basic skills being present already.
Okay, and we have another question from Philippe Zitoun. Do you expect to include large raw data from in vitro MEA systems?
Well, that's up for discussion, I think, for the whole consortium. As I said before, the main focus of the discussion so far has been on the in vivo data. And that's where we have the input, both from behavior and electrophysiology. If there is a compelling argument to include some of the in vitro data, that's debatable.
Thank you. So for the moment, we've come to the end of the questions. I've been doing IMI topic webinars for about 5 years now, and I don't think I've ever seen so many questions. So well done, everybody. I will say if you have any questions after today, you can, of course, always email us at infodesk@imi.europa.eu. As Elisabetta said, you should not contact the FPA topic writers because then we could get into questions of conflict of interest. So please send any questions you have to us and we will reply to you. So as I said as well, there is going to be a webinar in a couple of weeks on our rules and procedures. Do sign up for that. Also sign up for any other topics you might be interested in. Thank you very much to our speakers for their presentations and for their answering all of your questions. Thank you to Elisabetta as well. And on that note, I will wish you all very good luck with your presentations. Goodbye, everybody.